Go ahead, I dare you. Name a console that goes toe-to-toe with the Super NES when it comes to fighting games. This thing had so many classic fighters. Mortal Kombat 2, Killer Instinct, Street Fighter 2 Turbo, that weird Sailor Moon fighting game that was actually the very first fighting game made by Arc System Works, TMNT Tournament Fighters. All of those are damn fine games. All of them classics. But you know, not everything was sunshine and roses, because the thing is, for every good fighting game on the system, there was also some really bad ones. Games so terrible, yet somehow we kind of forget about them. Which is, that's why I'm here, to remind you of these games. Because to remember is to suffer, and to suffer is to know that you are truly alive. So, I dug up 3, count them, of the worst fighting games on Nintendo's little 16-bit console and present them here to you. And what better time seeing how it's spooky season? Oh, I mean, no, none of the games are horror themed, but they are all horrible. First up, Street Combat. Before we dig into the game itself, let's talk about the title, because my god, what a generic-ass name. It's like they couldn't decide which game to rip off more, Street Fighter or Mortal Kombat, and they just went, why not both? And oh boy, take one look at this box art. You can tell we're in for something real special with this one. Okay, 3 options to choose from. 2-player versus, which good luck getting a second person to play this piece of shit with you. Arcade mode, and options. And since it's just me, we'll take a peek at arcade mode. Oh. Ooh, yeah, so this is the kind of game where you can only play as one of 2 characters. You can select either Steven or, Steven with drip. Why does this look familiar? The characters look like they were traced over something else, and the poses, where have I seen these poses? Well, instead of beating around the bush and, doing a whole little bit of, oh, I'm so surprised, I'll just come out and say it. Street Combat is a Doki Doki Panic situation. Yes, in Japan, this game is actually a game based on the hit anime and manga Ranma 1/2, which is why there's 2 Stevens. Ironically, the developers also used exactly 1/2 of their ass to make this game. Street Combat feels gross to play. For one, this game has a jump button. Yes, you heard that correctly, a jump button. A button specifically for jumping. Now, for something like Smash Brothers, that's fine. It's meant to be like a platformer and a fighting game had a drunken one-night stand. But for a standard 2D fighting game, that doesn't work. Another thing with Street Combat is it cannot decide if it wants to be easy as piss or read your inputs. I've had the CPU go from Ben Askren in a boxing match to Jorge Masvidal fighting Ben Askren in the same round. You have 2 buttons, punch and kick. Oh, and also a special button. I guess 3. Care to guess how many specials you get? 1. Yep, just that 1. And it's not super useful unless your opponent is drunk, retarded, high, or knocked down and in a corner. You also, to go along with the fact that this game has a jump button, have a block button. Because it's not enough that Irem had to shit in my mouth, but they also had to piss in it as well. It also doesn't help that the game is slow as fuck, and half the time you'll jump just to get in even faster, even when you know that that is the wrong thing to do in this situation. And, well, Rumiko Takahashi's art has a very distinct look to it, the characters in this just look off. I didn't get to see all of them because I only played this for 30 minutes and figured, yeah, I've suffered enough. But from what I've seen, we have a black guy named Tyrone, a gay androgynous clown that I swear is from JoJo's Bizarre Adventure. He's got to be in one of those parts. There's a lot of episodes of JoJo, okay? A US military guy that fights with Kendo and is named G.I. Jim because G.I. Jose was probably just on the edge of copyright infringement. And also, a Nazi robot on a hoverboard. Yes, I'm being serious. Because only in the realm of fighting games can that ever not sound batshit insane. And again, the difficulty really is all over the place. A good strategy I found was cornering my opponent and spamming the shit out of my one special move as they were getting up, but I found that only worked half the time, which was better than actually trying to play using basic fighting game fundamentals. Street Combat also has really bad hitboxes, like UFC 2009 bad. I know I said earlier that there was one special move per character, but really I lied. There's actually 3, and they share inputs between the cast. Using this special button is that little circle thingy, but then you have one done by mashing the punch button and another done by pressing both punch and kick together. And oftentimes, the rapid punch special would come out and just not do anything. Sometimes I'd be well within range and my attack would do fuck all. It's almost like you have to be at a very specific range in order for it to actually function as intended. After about 30 minutes of Street Combat, I called it quits. I could not beat the 4th opponent, and there's only 6. I've definitely suffered enough. Trust me, you don't know true pain until you've been party boyed by a Nazi robot on a fucking hoverboard. But just for funsies, I figured to check out the actual Ranma 1/2 version. I figured it'd probably be the same game, and kind of. I mean, it is, and it does have some of the same issues, but weirdly not the big ones. It feels a little faster and smoother, and a lot of my issues in regards to the hitboxes were nowhere to be found. It still does fluctuate on the difficulty, but not quite as hard. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying this version's good, but it is better. Which is like saying that eating cat shit is better than eating Arby's. The difference is there, but it's small. Which makes me wonder why they didn't just release this version over here in the West. The anime aired over here in the West in 1993, and it's not like the license was an issue, because in 95, they actually released a Ranma 1/2 game on the Super Nintendo in the West with the license intact. Word of advice, if you ever walk down a dark alleyway and some homeless dude gives you the ultimatum of getting shanked or playing Street Combat, go with the stabbing. Trust me, it's a lot less painful. A lot of fighting games tend to focus on hand-to-hand combat, which is, what I prefer. So why don't we take a look at a weapons-based fighting game in the form of Sammy's Battle Blaze, which is just, it's like they just wanted to make a game with the initials BB. It sounds stupid. Might have looked cool on a magazine cover, but not coming out of your mouth. The game starts and we're greeted by legally safe Arnold Schwarzenegger, just standing there silently judging us for buying Battle Blaze. Couldn't even do like a legally safe version from the guy that played Conan in the shitty live-action TV show. If you couldn't guess, Battle Blaze is a weapons-based fighting game, kinda like Soul Calibur, yes, with a swords and sorcery motif. And it's also fucking awful. Like current Rick and Morty bad, or really any Rick and Morty, actually. For starters, you have a whole whopping 2 buttons. My desk fan has more buttons than this game requires. You have a regular melee swing, and a jump button. I didn't plan that, by the way. I had no idea that the first 2 games I'd be covering both had this massive issue in common. Fortunately, though, they decided to, not be completely retarded with this game, so it is a back-to-block fighting game. We're also greeted by 2 options, the hero and the battle. Yeah, fuck story mode and 2-player. From now on, I am only ever referring to story modes in games as the hero. Going into story mode, and we actually get a level select screen, kind of like Mega Man X7. Yes, there is a reason why I specified X7. But once battle actually starts, you're met with some of the absolute ugliest dog water visuals I have ever seen in a fighting game in my life. The backgrounds are just horrendous to look at, and the sprites lack any sort of real detail. Weird thing, I thought this orc guy had massive medieval mommy milkers, and it just turns out they were his pecs. You could fucking milk this man. Combat boils down to 2 things, slapping while jumping, and slapping while standing. And of course, as if the addition of a jump button wasn't bad enough, it's also your kick button. Yes, jumping and kicking share an input. This is on the Super Nintendo. There were enough fucking buttons! Imagine if you were playing Halo and crouch and shoot were both circle, and you might be going, but Nick, Halo's on the Xbox, it's not on the PlayStation. Give it time. It throws out a kick if you're crouching or in the air, and yeah, that's not fucking weird at all. And specials, yeah, forget them. I mean, the game does have them, but they're so unintuitive to perform. The main character, which, yes, like Street Combat, you only get to play as one character during the single player, can only do most of his while in the air. A lot of the time, you'll just be slapping your opponent while they block, and since this game doesn't have chip damage, they can and will, in fact, block forever. And since this game also doesn't have a timer, a basic feature in a fighting game, yes, they can and will block forever. The strategy that I found worked the best was knocking my opponent down and then just throwing them. Rinse and repeat. That got me through nearly every single round pretty easily. And you might be thinking that I haven't really gone into the details of the mechanics of Battle Blaze or Street Combat for that matter. That's because there fucking isn't any. Yeah, no combos, no super meter, not even a dick swinging forward or backdash. Nothing. This game came out in 92, and it shows. You know what else came out in 92? Mortal Kombat, Fatal Fury 2, Art of Fighting, Street Fighter was on its second version, all of which got Super Nintendo ports that were much better than this. There is absolutely nothing remarkable or interesting about this game, other than just how clumsy it feels. Your strikes have next to no sense of impact, and many times you just feel like you're wildly swinging in hopes of landing a hit. Not that it matters, because each hit has the feeling of hitting your opponent with a cat o' nine tails made of cooked linguine. And after beating your opponent, this shit just happens.
What the hell was that?
Yeah, you know, I didn't even bother looking up the plot for this game because if the game doesn't care to tell me something, then I really don't care to know about it. But what about the characters? Well, we have Karen, big titty orc man, small titty not orc chick, that one guy from that episode of Dexter's Lab that parodied anime and just couldn't, and no, that's not his fucking name. Schnauzer? Schnauzer? Who the fuck named him Schnauzer? Okay. No, I'm sorry. That's the best name for a character in a fighting game. Imagine going to Evo and being able to main Schnauzer. What's his brother's name? Schnoz? So, who do you main in Battle Blaze? Me? Well, I'm mostly a Karen main, but I also do have a pocket Schnauzer. And you're fighting them because they've all been controlled by some Dark Lord, this guy. He's the final boss, and honestly, kudos on making him the coolest character in the game. I like the animation for his throw, that's some badass shit right there. But the rest of his shit? Yeah, he hits like a truck and has a health bar far greater than my patience. I tried to beat him, but after using up all of my continues, all of my patience, and I'm sure there's another thing I used up, I just figured, no, this is enough. This is enough. Please, make it stop. Make it stop. Waterboard me if you have to, but please let me stop playing Battle Blaze. Now, I could have used the infinite continues cheat, but why? So I can play more of this shit? No thanks. An hour was more than enough. Yeah, you're going to notice a bit of a pattern with all of these games. You kind of experience everything they have to offer within an hour of playing, which, for an arcade game, is fine. But the thing is, Street Fighter 2 still had enough depth and strategy to it to keep you coming back even after hours of playing. There's a reason why it was the single best-selling fighting game for nearly 3 goddamn decades. It had substance. None of these games have that. Especially not today's last topic. See, Street Fighter 2 was not the first fighting game. Obviously. If the number in its title was any indication. No. See, there were others before it. And almost all of them sucked. For example, Pit Fighter. Pit Fighter is actually a fairly innovative game for its time. It was one of the first successful fighting games from an American developer, Atari, and even pioneered the art of using digitized actors in video games, which Midway would use for their much more successful and better fighting franchise, Mortal Kombat. But, like it or not, Pit Fighter was kind of successful. Successful enough to get ports on the Sega Genesis, Master System, Game Boy, and even some PCs that you've only ever heard of if you understand what cricket is. And there was also a port to the Super Nintendo from Tengen and our good old friends at THQ. Now, the thing with Pit Fighter is that it's a steaming load of shit, even for its time. And with most home console ports of arcade games being much worse than the arcade game it's based off of, you can imagine how much worse the Super Nintendo version of Pit Fighter is. For starters, we have more playable characters in the last two games, a whole whopping 3. We have Buzz, a big ex-pro wrestler. Yeah, he strikes me as a guy that knows what Vince McMahon smells like. Ty, a professional kickboxer who recently got hit with the shit Michael Jackson had between the arcade and home versions. And Kato, who is Japanese. And that's all. And once you select your fighter for the pits, you are thrust into your first fight with no sort of context, just right into the fire. Don't be a bitch about it. Now, if you're looking at this and thinking, well, what a horrible day to have eyes, I am right there with you. The visuals in the arcade version were already not very good, and on the Super NES, they're worse. It's honestly hard to tell what anything is, and the crowd sort of blends together. Yes, those are in fact supposed to be people. Now, we have 3 buttons to attempt to play this with. Punch, kick, and God fucking damn, I swear I didn't plan this, okay? Why do all 3 of them have fucking jump buttons? It's like the great unifier of shitty fighting games. Now, the key word earlier was attempt, because I am throwing out all of these strikes with the confidence of a man who just shat his pants during a job interview. The hit detection in this is so bad that I can't even tell what hits and what doesn't, and the fact that there's no sound for strikes landing makes it even worse. So, my go-to strategy, which, if you could call it that, for Pit Fighter, was to knock the opponent down and just spam whatever the fuck I could, in hopes that I would hit him as he got back up. Again, there's no feedback from the game, so I frankly don't even know what was actually making contact. And since the health is represented by numbers and not a bar, like every other fighting game ever made, even ones made before this, it's kind of hard to even keep track of everything because you're trying to pay attention to 6 numbers at the very least, while also trying to fight against an opponent that you can barely hit but has no issue whatsoever beating your ass like a pair of goddamn bongos. It took me way too many tries just to beat the first opponent. I'd ask if anyone playtested this, but I have a feeling I already know the answer to that. After a while, I did manage to knock the first opponent out, at the same time he knocked me out. But hey, I mean, a win's a win, except when it fucking isn't. And every time you lose, you go right back to the title screen. So I devised a devious strategy. See, Pit Fighter is a 2-player game, so why not just get a second player in there? And since I couldn't get anyone to actually willingly play Pit Fighter with me, and trust me, I tried, I just set it up in the emulator for 2 players to work with 1 controller. And then I'll have both of them gang up on the guy. This game's not shit. These bastards thought of everything. After you beat the first opponent, your score is tallied up as you stand on a forklift, and pretty sure that's an OSHA violation, but so is running an illegal fight club in a Home Depot. Fucking OSHA ruining my fun. And the second opponent is where I called it quits. Yeah, really. I played Battle Blaze for a total of 40 minutes. Exact time, 40 minutes. Street Combat got at least 30 minutes of my time, and another 20 if you count Ranma 1/2. But Pit Fighter? 20 goddamn minutes of my life that honestly, I don't even want back. Those are tainted minutes. I want nothing to do with them. Pit Fighter. You'll punch, you'll kick, you'll weep over every quarter or second you spent on this enormous pile of shit. And there you have it. 3 of the absolute worst fighting games, not even just on the Super Nintendo, but ever. I think a lot of people like to focus on the good fighting games on the system, which makes sense. I too would also rather remember Weapon Lord over Battle Blaze. I almost forgot the name. That's how forgettable of a game it was. But I still feel that it's important to remember the bad ones. I mean, after all, Street Fighter 1 sucked, and look what that got us. It got us Street Fighter 2, and Alpha, and Third Strike, Street Fighter 2010, Legend of Chun-Li, the movie, the game based off the movie. You know what? Never mind. Street Fighter sucks now.